Some messages are loud, this one is not. Some affirmations are given to crowds, this one is not. If you found this, it is not because you were searching for motivation. It is because something in your spirit has been carrying weight quietly. You have been showing up without applause, obeying without recognition, trusting God without evidence. And you have wondered, even if you never said it out loud, does God see this? Hear this slowly and clearly. God is proud of you, not because you succeeded, not because you were perfect, but because you remained faithful when it would have been easier to walk away. This message is not for everyone. It is for those who kept going when obedience cost them comfort. 1. God's pride is rooted in faithfulness, not outcomes. God has never evaluated his children the way the world does. The world asks one question first: what did you produce? God asks a different one: did you remain faithful? People look for visible wins, public progress, measurable success. God looks for loyalty of heart when there is nothing to show yet. This difference matters more than most people realize, because it explains why many faithful people feel unseen while still being deeply approved by heaven. Faithfulness is staying aligned with God even when obedience feels unrewarded. It is choosing what is right when nothing immediately improves. It is continuing to pray when prayers feel unanswered, continuing to trust when clarity does not arrive, continuing to walk forward when the road feels repetitive and quiet. This is not weakness. This is the highest form of spiritual strength. Scripture consistently reveals that God works on a timeline invisible to human impatience. Fruit is never immediate, but faithfulness always precedes it. Seeds are planted long before harvest is visible. Roots grow deep underground before anything breaks the surface. God values what happens beneath the surface far more than what is seen above it, because what is unseen determines what will eventually stand. You obeyed when it would have been easier to compromise. You continued showing up when motivation faded. You chose prayer instead of resentment, humility instead of comparison, patience instead of panic. None of this felt impressive. None of it earned applause. But it earned something far more significant: God's pleasure. Many people confuse silence with abandonment. They assume that because nothing is changing externally, nothing is happening internally or spiritually. That assumption is false. God often works in silence because silence protects sincerity. When there is no audience, motives are purified. When there is no praise, obedience becomes honest. Faith practiced in obscurity is faith that belongs fully to God and not to performance. Obedience in obscurity carries enormous spiritual weight because it proves trust. It says, "I believe God is good, even when outcomes are delayed." It says, "I will continue doing what is right, even if no one ever notices." It says, "I trust God's character more than I trust immediate results." That kind of faith is rare because most people only remain faithful when reinforcement is visible. God is proud of you not because you reached a milestone, but because you refused to quit when progress felt invisible. He is proud because you stayed when walking away would have been justified by human standards. He is proud because you did not let disappointment redefine your devotion. You did not treat God like a transaction where obedience demands instant reward. You treated him like a father whose wisdom you trust even when you do not understand the timing. Faithfulness without applause strips away ego. It exposes whether faith is rooted in love or expectation. Many people are faithful until obedience becomes costly, slow, or lonely. You remained faithful when the emotional return was minimal. That reveals maturity. It reveals depth. It reveals a heart anchored in truth rather than outcome. God does not rush what he is building in you because He is not just interested in what you will receive. He is preparing who you will become. Outcomes come and go, but character remains. Faithfulness shapes character. It builds endurance, humility, discernment, and trust. These qualities cannot be rushed or faked. They are formed only through time, pressure, and consistency. What you are learning now in silence will protect you later in visibility. What you are practicing now without reward will sustain you when responsibility increases. God often delays outcomes not as punishment, but as preparation. He knows that blessing without foundation can damage a person. Faithfulness ensures that when fruit finally appears, it will not crush you. The world celebrates arrival. God celebrates alignment. The world applauds results. God honors obedience. The world rewards what is visible. God treasures what is hidden. This is why heaven's evaluation often contradicts human opinion. Someone overlooked by people may be highly trusted by God. So, if your journey feels quiet, repetitive, or unnoticed, understand this clearly. Silence does not mean stagnation. Obscurity does not mean insignificance. Waiting does not mean failure. God is watching with approval, not impatience. He is proud because you stayed faithful without guarantees. Faithfulness without applause is precious because it is pure. It is not fueled by attention, recognition, or validation. It is fueled by trust. And trust is the foundation of every relationship God values. You may not see the fruit yet. That does not mean it is not growing. What matters most is that you are still walking the path. And that, in heaven's eyes, is already a victory. 2. God is proud of your silent endurance. Endurance is one of the most misunderstood virtues in the Christian life because it does not look impressive from the outside. It has no dramatic moments, no visible milestones, no clear finish line. Endurance is simply the decision to keep going when stopping would feel reasonable. It is remaining steady when life gives you every excuse to collapse. And God sees endurance very differently than people do. Most people only recognize strength when it is loud, when someone overcomes publicly, when the victory is obvious. But the endurance God is proud of often happens quietly, in private moments where no one is watching. It happens in ordinary days that feel heavy, in seasons where prayers feel repetitive, in lives that continue forward without relief. You endured things you never fully explained to anyone. You carried emotional weight that others never noticed. You showed up when you felt drained. You kept your faith intact even when your energy was low and your heart felt tired. That matters deeply to God. Silent endurance is not passive. It is active trust. It is choosing to believe that God is still present even when you cannot feel Him. It is choosing to continue living with integrity when disappointment tempts you toward bitterness. It is choosing patience when frustration would feel justified. Scripture teaches that endurance produces character and character produces hope. That sequence is intentional. Endurance stretches the soul. It builds spiritual muscle. It forms depth that cannot be developed in ease. God allows endurance not because He enjoys watching His children struggle, but because He knows what endurance produces in them. You endured confusion without abandoning faith. You endured delay without surrendering obedience. You endured emotional exhaustion without hardening your heart. Many people give up not because God failed them, but because endurance required more patience than they were willing to offer. You stayed. Endurance often looks like continuing to pray when prayers feel unanswered. It looks like continuing to love when affection is not returned. It looks like continuing to do what is right even when doing wrong would feel easier. These are quiet victories. Heaven counts them even when earth ignores them. God is proud of your endurance because endurance requires trust without evidence. It requires believing that God is working even when circumstances suggest otherwise. It requires accepting that leading does not always mean explaining. You trusted God's character when you could not trace His plan. Silent endurance also reveals maturity. It shows that your faith is not dependent on constant reassurance. It shows that you are not following God only when the path feels encouraging. You remained anchored when encouragement was absent. That is not accidental. That is cultivated faith. Many people endure loudly. They make sure their suffering is seen, their struggle validated, their pain acknowledged. There is nothing wrong with being honest about pain, but silent endurance carries a different kind of weight. It means you carried responsibility without demanding recognition. You trusted God to see what others missed. God sees the nights you went to bed tired but still prayed. He sees the mornings you woke up without motivation but still chose faith. He sees the strength it took to keep your heart soft when circumstances pushed you toward resentment. None of that was wasted. Endurance refines motives. It removes entitlement. It teaches surrender. It strips away the illusion that faith exists to make life easier. Instead, it reveals faith as the anchor that makes life survivable. Through endurance, you learned how to lean on God rather than control outcomes. God is proud of your endurance because it prepared you for future responsibility. Endurance increases capacity. It expands patience. It strengthens discernment. People who have not endured often collapse when responsibility increases. God prepares His people before He promotes them. What you endured quietly built resilience that will sustain you later. The strength you carry now was not borrowed. It was formed. It was earned through persistence. It was shaped through long obedience in the same direction. If this season has felt long, understand this clearly. Endurance does not mean you are stuck. It means you are being strengthened. God is not ignoring you. He is trusting you with a process that not everyone can handle. Endurance is not weakness. It is disciplined faith. It is spiritual stamina. It is proof that your relationship with God is rooted deeper than emotion or outcome. God is proud of you for staying when leaving would have been understandable, for trusting when clarity was absent, for enduring without applause. Your endurance is evidence of depth, and God never overlooks depth. 3. God is proud of your obedience when it cost you relationships. Obedience to God often comes with a price that few people talk about honestly. It is not always dramatic persecution or visible sacrifice. More often, it is quiet separation, misunderstanding, distance. The slow fading of relationships that once felt secure. This is one of the hardest costs of obedience, and it is one of the clearest signs that your walk with God is real. Many people follow God as long as it does not disrupt their social comfort, as long as obedience does not challenge relationships, routines, or identities. But the moment God's direction begins to reshape priorities, not everyone can come with you. This is not because you became arrogant or distant. It is because obedience changes alignment, and alignment determines who can walk beside you. God is proud of you because you chose His voice over the fear of losing people. That choice is never easy. Relationships provide comfort, validation, familiarity. Letting them change or fall away can feel like loss, even when obedience is right. Yet you trusted God enough to obey, even when it made you feel isolated. Scripture shows this pattern repeatedly. God calls people out before He sends them forward. Separation often comes before purpose becomes clear, not as punishment, but as preparation. When God is shaping direction, He also reshapes environment. Certain voices cannot remain if clarity is going to grow. You experienced moments where obedience made you seem different, less available, less agreeable, less aligned with old expectations. Some people did not understand the change. Others resisted it. A few quietly drifted away. That does not mean you failed. It means your obedience was real enough to be noticed. God is proud of you because you did not compromise just to keep people comfortable. You did not silence conviction to preserve familiarity. You did not abandon truth to maintain approval. That kind of obedience requires courage, especially when it costs connection. Losing alignment with people can feel like rejection, but often it is redirection. God removes certain relationships not because they are bad people, but because they are no longer assigned to the next season of your life. Clinging to relationships beyond their season can delay growth and confuse direction. You trusted God even when obedience felt lonely. You accepted distance without turning bitter. You allowed relationships to change without forcing them to stay. That shows maturity. Many people resist God's leading because they fear being alone. You walked forward anyway. God is proud of you because obedience exposed where your security truly rested. You could have anchored your identity in belonging, but you anchored it in obedience. You allowed God to redefine your sense of safety. That is not weakness. That is surrender. There is a quiet grief that comes with relational loss through obedience. It is not loud enough for public sympathy. It is not dramatic enough for explanation. Yet God sees it fully. He sees the moments you missed people, the confusion you felt, the temptation to go back just to feel familiar comfort again, and He saw you resist that pull. Obedience does not guarantee immediate clarity. Sometimes God asks for separation before explanation. He asks for trust before understanding. You accepted that order. You trusted His wisdom without demanding details. That trust matters deeply to Him. God is proud of you because obedience refined your discernment. It taught you that not everyone who starts with you is meant to finish with you. It taught you that proximity does not equal assignment. It taught you how to walk without needing constant affirmation from others. What felt like loss was also protection. Certain relationships would have limited your growth, distracted your focus, or diluted your obedience. God removed them quietly because loud removals often create unnecessary damage. Silence was mercy. You may still feel moments of loneliness. That does not mean obedience was wrong. It means you are between seasons. God often fills relational gaps after identity has stabilized. He builds inner security before external support. God is proud of you because you trusted Him with your relationships, not just your beliefs. You allowed Him to rearrange your circle, not just your theology. That level of obedience goes deeper than words. If you ever wonder whether the cost was worth it, remember this: God never subtracts without intention. What He removes is always connected to what He is preparing to give. Obedience that costs relationships is often obedience that protects destiny. God is proud of you for choosing alignment over attachment, for choosing truth over comfort, for trusting His leading even when it meant walking alone for a while. That kind of obedience is not common, and heaven does not overlook it. 4. God is proud of your integrity when no one was watching. Integrity is easy to admire and difficult to live. It is not proven in public moments or visible decisions. Integrity is revealed in private choices when there is no audience, no recognition, and no immediate consequence. This is why integrity carries such weight with God. It shows who you are when nothing is being monitored but your own conscience. You were presented with opportunities to take shortcuts, moments where compromising would have benefited you, situations where bending truth, lowering standards, or choosing convenience would have gone unnoticed. And yet, you didn't take them, not because someone would catch you, but because you knew God would see you. God is proud of your integrity because integrity requires trust. It says, "I believe God can provide without me manipulating outcomes. I believe God's timing is safer than my shortcuts. I believe obedience protects me even when compromise seems faster." That belief honors God deeply. Integrity often delays results. It can slow progress. It can cost opportunities that others seem to gain easily. Watching people succeed through compromise while you continue waiting can feel unfair. But integrity is not about fairness in the moment. It is about alignment over time. God values alignment because alignment sustains blessing. When no one was watching, you chose honesty. You chose restraint. You chose to walk away from things that felt wrong, even when they were tempting. Those decisions did not feel heroic. They felt ordinary, inconvenient, and sometimes costly. But heaven records ordinary obedience more carefully than dramatic acts. Integrity protects you from becoming someone you cannot respect later. God is proud because you guarded your inner life. You did not sacrifice your peace for progress. You did not betray your values for validation. You understood, perhaps intuitively, that success without integrity is fragile and dangerous. Many people confuse integrity with perfection. Integrity is not about never failing. It is about refusing to justify what you know is wrong. It is about repentance when you fall and correction when you drift. You did not normalize compromise. You did not make excuses to protect your image. You stayed honest with God and with yourself. God sees integrity as a form of worship. It declares that He is worthy of obedience even when obedience is inconvenient. It declares that His approval matters more than outcomes. When you chose integrity, you were choosing trust over control. There were moments when integrity made you feel unseen, when doing the right thing felt lonely because no one acknowledged it, when the temptation to be noticed competed with the call to be faithful. God saw those moments clearly. He saw the restraint you practiced. He saw the discipline you maintained. He saw the humility it required to stay consistent without praise. Integrity also refines motives. It removes the need to impress. It shifts focus from image to substance. When integrity guides decisions, identity stabilizes. You are no longer chasing approval or fearing exposure. You are simply walking in alignment with who God is shaping you to be. God is proud of your integrity because it proves readiness. Integrity is essential for anything entrusted by God. Influence without integrity corrupts. Opportunity without integrity overwhelms. God often waits to release responsibility until integrity has been tested in private. What you practiced quietly is preparing you for what you will carry publicly. You may not see immediate reward for integrity. That does not mean it went unnoticed. God honors integrity differently than the world does. He honors it by protecting you from consequences you never see, by closing doors you thought you wanted, by preserving your character while shaping your future. Integrity builds trust with God because it reflects consistency. You are the same person in private that you are in public. That consistency matters. God works through people He can trust. Integrity signals that trustworthiness. If you ever questioned whether integrity was worth the delay, understand this. Shortcuts always demand payment later. Integrity pays slowly, but it pays sustainably. God's pride is rooted in long-term faithfulness, not short-term gain. God is proud of you because you chose who you were becoming over what you could gain. You chose character over convenience. You chose alignment over advantage. When no one was watching, you still honored God. And that is never wasted. 5. God is proud of your continued trust after disappointment. Disappointment has a way of quietly reshaping faith. Not all at once, not loudly, but slowly, through unanswered prayers, unmet expectations, and outcomes that did not align with what you believed God would do. This is where many people's faith begins to fracture, not because they stop believing in God, but because they stop trusting Him personally. You were disappointed. You hoped for something specific. You prayed with sincerity. You believed with expectation. And then things unfolded differently. The silence was confusing. The outcome hurt. You were left carrying questions that never received clear answers. Yet, despite that, you did not walk away. God is proud of you because you continued to trust Him when disappointment would have justified withdrawal. Trust after disappointment is not naive faith. It is mature faith. It is faith that has been tested by reality and still chooses to remain. Disappointment tempts people to build emotional distance from God as a form of self-protection, to pray less, to expect less, to hope less, not out of rebellion, but out of fear of being hurt again. You resisted that instinct. You did not shut your heart down. You kept your relationship with God open, even when it felt vulnerable. Continued trust after disappointment requires humility. It requires admitting that God's ways are higher than our understanding. It requires surrendering the belief that faith guarantees specific outcomes. You learned, perhaps painfully, that faith is not about controlling God's actions, but about trusting His character. God is proud because you trusted Him without explanations. You accepted that not everything would make sense in the moment. You allowed mystery without letting it turn into resentment. That posture honors God deeply because it acknowledges His wisdom even when it is not visible. There were moments when your trust became quieter, less expressive, less confident. That does not mean it was weaker. It became deeper. Loud faith is often untested. Quiet faith has usually been through something. You learned to trust God without demanding reassurance at every step. You continued praying, even if the prayers were simpler. You continued believing, even if belief felt cautious. You continued obeying, even when motivation was low. That consistency mattered more than emotional intensity. God values steadiness far more than enthusiasm. Disappointment also refined your expectations. It taught you to anchor hope in God Himself rather than in specific outcomes. That shift is significant. When trust is rooted in God's presence rather than His performance, faith becomes resilient. It no longer collapses when circumstances disappoint. God is proud of you because you did not let disappointment distort His image in your heart. You did not turn Him into someone unreliable or distant. You wrestled honestly, but you did not abandon relationship. You stayed engaged. You stayed open. You stayed willing. Many people live with unresolved disappointment toward God and call it maturity. In reality, it is often guardedness. You chose something harder. You chose vulnerability. You allowed yourself to trust again, even without guarantees. That required courage. Continued trust also signals growth. It shows that your faith is no longer dependent on emotional highs or visible confirmations. You learned to walk with God even when the emotional reward was minimal. That kind of faith is sustainable. It does not collapse under pressure. God sees the moments when you could have grown cynical but chose grace instead. When you could have grown distant but chose prayer instead. When you could have hardened your heart but chose softness instead. Those choices matter deeply. Disappointment does not disqualify faith. Avoidance does. You did not avoid God. You leaned in, even if cautiously. You allowed Him to remain close, even when answers were unclear. God is proud of you because trust after disappointment proves that your faith is real. It has been tested, strained, questioned, and refined, yet it remains. You did not trust because everything went right. You trusted because you believed God was still good. And that kind of trust is rare. 6. God is proud of your humility in waiting. Waiting is one of the most refining experiences in the Christian life because it exposes what we believe about control, entitlement, and trust. It reveals whether faith is rooted in surrender or in timelines we quietly expect God to follow. Waiting strips away the illusion that obedience gives us leverage over outcomes. And this is why waiting, when done with humility, matters deeply to God. You waited without demanding explanations. You waited without forcing doors open. You waited while watching others move ahead, receive answers, or experience breakthroughs you had prayed for yourself. That kind of waiting is not passive, it is active humility. God is proud of you because you did not treat waiting as injustice. You did not accuse God of neglect simply because timing felt slow. You did not assume delay meant denial. You accepted that God's perspective extends beyond what you can see, and you allowed Him to work without rushing Him. Humility in waiting means accepting that God does not owe us speed. It means trusting that His timing is purposeful, not careless. You resisted the temptation to manipulate outcomes or manufacture progress. You chose submission over control, and that choice honors God. Waiting reveals the posture of the heart. Some people wait while complaining, others wait while demanding signs. You waited with restraint. You continued to obey even when obedience did not seem to accelerate anything. That restraint reflects deep trust. God is proud of you because humility in waiting requires letting go of entitlement. It requires believing that God's plans are not delayed simply because they do not align with your expectations. You allowed God to remain sovereign over the process, not just the promise. There were moments when waiting tested your patience and your identity, when you wondered if you were behind, when comparison crept in, when you questioned whether you had misunderstood God altogether. Yet you did not allow those thoughts to turn into rebellion. You brought them to God quietly and stayed aligned. Waiting humbles ambition. It teaches dependence. It dismantles the belief that effort alone produces blessing. Through waiting, you learn to rely on God rather than your own urgency. That lesson cannot be learned in seasons of immediate response. God often uses waiting to build capacity. He prepares people inwardly before He moves them outwardly. You were not being ignored, you were being prepared. Waiting was not punishment, it was formation. You continued showing up during seasons that felt repetitive. You remained faithful in routines that felt ordinary. That consistency in waiting is evidence of maturity. Many people only remain faithful when movement is visible. You remained faithful even when nothing seemed to change. God is proud of your humility because you did not make waiting about yourself. You did not measure your worth by how quickly things happened. You allowed God to define timing without taking it personally. That shows emotional and spiritual growth. Waiting also protects you. It guards against receiving things before you are ready to carry them. God knows the weight of what He intends to give. He also knows the weight you are capable of holding. Waiting ensures alignment between the two. There were moments when waiting felt like silence, but silence does not mean inactivity. God works deeply in quiet seasons. He shapes motives. He clarifies direction. He strengthens discernment. None of that work is visible, but all of it is necessary. God is proud of you because you trusted Him with time. Time is one of the hardest things to surrender. You gave God space to work without pressuring Him to perform. That kind of trust is rare. Waiting taught you to rest rather than rush, to listen rather than react, to submit rather than strive. Those lessons will sustain you long after the waiting season ends. If you are still waiting, understand this clearly. Humility in waiting is not wasted faith. It is refined faith. It is faith that trusts God's wisdom more than personal urgency. God is proud of you for waiting without resentment, for trusting without timelines, for surrendering control while remaining faithful. That kind of humility carries great weight in heaven. 7. God is proud because you did not become hard. Life gives countless opportunities to become hardened. Pain invites bitterness, delay invites cynicism, disappointment invites withdrawal. Many people survive difficult seasons by closing themselves off emotionally and spiritually. They learn how to protect themselves by becoming guarded, skeptical, and distant. You were given those same opportunities, and you chose differently. God is proud of you because you did not allow hardship to change the quality of your heart. You were hurt, but you did not become cruel. You were disappointed, but you did not become cynical. You were stretched, but you did not become closed. That choice required strength most people never develop. Softness after pain is not weakness, it is courage. It takes courage to remain open in a world that teaches self-protection above all else. It takes courage to continue trusting God when circumstances try to convince you to expect less. You refuse to let pain rewrite your nature. There were moments when it would have felt safer to stop caring so deeply, to pray with less expectation, to love with less vulnerability, to hope with conditions attached. You felt those temptations. Yet you did not let them define you. You guarded your heart without hardening it. God is proud because you understood something many people miss. Hardness may feel like strength, but it actually limits growth. A hardened heart cannot receive correction, comfort, or renewal. You stayed teachable, you stayed responsive, you stayed willing to be shaped. Remaining soft does not mean ignoring boundaries. It means setting them without bitterness. It means protecting your peace without poisoning your spirit. You learned how to say no without resentment and how to walk away without hatred. That balance is not accidental. It is formed through maturity. You allowed God to comfort you rather than letting resentment take root. You brought your pain to Him instead of letting it ferment in isolation. You processed hurt through prayer instead of through bitterness. That choice kept your heart alive. God is proud of you because softness preserves connection. A soft heart can still hear God clearly. It can still respond to conviction. It can still experience joy. Hardness numbs all of that. You refused numbness. You chose life. There were moments when staying soft felt risky, when trusting again felt uncomfortable, when opening your heart felt like an invitation to be hurt again. You did not rush those moments, but you did not shut them down either. You allowed healing to take time without letting fear take control. Softness also reflects humility. It acknowledges that pain did not make you superior to others. You did not wear suffering as a badge of entitlement. You did not use hardship to justify harshness. You remained compassionate, even when compassion was costly. God is proud because you did not let pain distort His image in your heart. You did not project disappointment onto His character. You did not turn Him into someone distant or uncaring. You allowed trust to remain, even if it became quieter and deeper. A soft heart can still worship honestly. It can still forgive gradually. It can still hope carefully. These are not small things. They are signs of spiritual resilience. You may not realize how rare this is. Many people endure pain but lose tenderness. They survive, but they do not stay alive inside. You stayed alive. You stayed present. You stayed prayerful. God is proud of you because your softness kept you aligned. It protected your future. It preserved your ability to receive what God still intends to give. Hardness would have closed those doors. Remaining soft was not easy. It required intentional choices, repeated surrender, and ongoing trust. God saw every moment where you could have shut down and chose not to. You did not become hard. You did not become bitter. You did not become closed, and that choice honors God deeply. A soft heart after hardship is evidence of strength refined by faith, and God never overlooks that kind of strength. If you have listened this far, understand this clearly and without doubt. God has been watching your journey more closely than you realize, not with disappointment, not with impatience, but with quiet approval. You were faithful when results were absent. You endured when strength felt low. You obeyed when obedience cost you comfort. You waited without demanding control. You trusted after disappointment. You protected your integrity in private. You kept your heart soft when life tried to harden it. This is why God is proud of you. Not because your life looks impressive to others, but because your heart remained aligned with Him when it would have been easier to drift. Heaven does not measure success the way the world does. Heaven measures faithfulness, humility, trust, and surrender. You may still be waiting. You may still be unsure of what comes next. That does not mean you are behind. It means God is still working carefully, intentionally, and personally in your life. This message was not for everyone. It was for those who kept walking even when the road felt lonely and quiet. Rest in this truth. You are seen. You are known. And God is proud of you.